All right. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for tuning in for another Saturday. Here we got is another live panel discussion, and today we're going to be talking about healing and moving forward after spousal loss. I'm going to be bringing on my panel this afternoon, and for this evening's discussion, you guys sit back, enjoy, ask questions, let us know what you guys think, and we're going to get this thing started. All right. All right. Hello, everyone, and how's everybody doing today?
Doing well.
Doing well.
Doing really
All
well.
right. So before we get started, let's take a few seconds and introduce yourselves.
Oh,
Go ahead, Dave.
okay. My name is Dave Roberts. I've been a member of the Global Grief Network for 2 years. Um, I'm an adjunct professor of psychology, child life at University, bereavement support specialist. I've experienced loss throughout the spectrum, including the loss of a child, several pet losses, the loss of both parents. I've danced with grief since I've been 5 years old, and I've danced in that energy for a long time. So that's my story for now, and I'm sticking to it. But at the end of the podcast, I'll have more to share and during.
Hi, Dave. I'm Kathy Gleason.
Hi, Gabby.
I host the As I Live in Grief podcast. Thanks, Tony, for having me on this panel. Grief, as a general topic, is something I feel very deeply about. And that's one reason I created the podcast. I've been a member of the Global Grief Network for a little over a year and have enjoyed collaborating with many people and look forward to continuing in that vein. I have lost both parents. I've lost an infant child, less than 24 hours old. Um, and that grief was complicated because I was never able to see him or touch him or hold him. He was whisked to another hospital for some specialized care that failed ultimately. More recently, and the reason I'm part of tonight's panel, is 5 years ago, my husband Tom died of a brain cancer known as a glioblastoma multiforme grade 4, one of the most aggressive and unpredictable types of cancer. So, hello, everyone, and thanks for having me.
Hi, everybody. I'm Anna Waters. I've been part of the Global Grief Network for about 3 minutes. It's been about, what has it been, 2 weeks? Something like that. I just got introduced, and I'm excited to be a part of this network. I've written the book When Love Stays, which is launching this fall, and I have a podcast called Sunshine Waters Podcast. And my losses, I have several. But within the last 10 years, I've lost multiple babies to miscarriage. My husband, who was diagnosed at 36 with stage 4 stomach cancer, fought his journey for almost 5 years. And he passed away about 7 years ago, which is really sad. And we miss him, but he was a great guy. And that's why we're here. And in addition to that, I also lost both parents simultaneous to my husband dying too. So I have a lot of grief and a lot of hope. So thanks for having me.
Lakaya?
My name is Lakaya. I've lost back in 2014, April of 2014, I lost my husband. He had high blood pressure, diabetes, and he had a tumor. I also lost my boyfriend in January 2021 to a heart attack as well as other issues. And that same year, August of 2021, I lost my godson to a moped accident.
Hey everyone, hi, I'm Mark Shutter. I've been part of the Global Grief Network for I think about a year now. My loss occurred way back in 1993 when my first wife died after we were married just just over 5 years. So I moved on, actually moved forward, and 25 years after her death, I wrote a book called Cowboys Are Not Supposed to Cry, kind of looking back at that experience. Like I said, it's been 30 years this past spring, and I'm happy to be here and talk about it.
Hi, I'm Nikki Jean. I bring in the New Zealand accent today. I was widowed at 27, where it was like a movie script at the time. He died in my arms. It was a murder, and we were overseas at the time. So that is probably one of my biggest awakening moments in my life. And I'm in a space where, because that was 14 years ago, and I'm in a space now where I'm so appreciative for being part of my life story now. There's been wildly lots of other crazy grief moments in that space, but that one's had the biggest impact on my life with family members. And it has taken me on a journey into my spiritual awakening within myself. So the way I show up in the world now is supporting people in this, like in a holistic sense, in the psychological and the spiritual, whatever that means for you. But it has I'm the opportunist who takes the love of the really messy moments in life, and I'm in the flow of seeing the wisdom and being in that space and being in appreciation. So that's kind of my standpoint of where I sit. And I know that is wildly different to so many other people, but it's the way I show up in the world and what feels good for me. So anything that I'm speaking here today just is what feels good and what I believe to be true for me in this moment, because I am in the evolution of myself as well. So I'm going to hand in my introduction now, put myself on mute.
Excuse me. I'm Jay Lewis III. I lost my wife in 2016. She died of a mysterious illness. I mean, it was they said it was due to pneumonia, but she was literally healthy one day, and the very next day, she started to become sick and was hospitalized. Within 24 hours, was brain dead, had 4 heart attacks, all kinds of things happened to her. She survived 30 days before she passed away. I also have 2 children. At the time, they were 13 and 17. One was heading to college, and it happened to be the same college that I met my wife in. So that was interesting. My youngest was 13 at the time. Since then, we've learned how to be a family without the woman I love. I grew up with this woman. I mean, we were married 17 years, together 26. But the blessing is that what she gave me was not only 2 beautiful children, but the ability to keep her memory and to move forward and to do what I need to do to help other people who might be dealing with circumstances related to their spouse or related to grief, period. That's my story.
All right. Listening to everyone, I guess the question that comes to mind to kick this thing off is that what were some of the steps that you took in your healing process, as after you lost your spouse? Because there's a lot of people out there right now, and I know there's some men out there, and then we know a few guys that have lost their significant other to suicides, to some really strange things, So I want to kind of like work it backwards a little bit. What was some of the steps that you took in your healing process? And anybody can chime in.
Well, if for me, it was really interesting because for the first few years, I was trying to keep things moving exactly the way they were, although everything was a total new normal. It took me having to realize that I couldn't keep things the same way for me to realize that, you know what, I need to move forward, not lose my thought of her, but I need to find myself. And for me, it was learning how to cook actually, because honestly, I said it before. I've written a book called "Cook Away Your Grief" to find the better version of you. Because I'm not the chef. I'm just a guy who in 2016 I couldn't even boil water. But now I've learned how to cook and it became therapy for me. It became a way for me to kind of get away for just a second and not lose myself. Learn something new. My wife was an excellent cook. So everything I did was to just try to match what she could do, which I could never. But still, you know, it was my way of being able to find myself. And from there, I found that I had other talents and things that I would not have known if my wife had not unfortunately passed away. I'm a podcaster. I've written a book. I'm a speaker. All of these things never would have materialized if I hadn't gone through what I went through. A lot of people ask me, would I trade it? I don't know because I just don't have that experience. I would love to have my wife here with me. And I love to have her say, "You've done a great job learning to do these new things." But unfortunately, I don't have that. So I tell people all the time, find something that's within you. Find something about yourself that you had no idea that you could do and explore it. Because now doing that will allow you to be able to find yourself. It's different than the relationship that you had. Because again, using cooking as an example, I used to just walk in and be happy when my wife would have something on the table. But after going through a long time of just fast food and eating unhealthy, I had to realize that I had to make some changes. So explore something within you is a suggestion that I would make to people out here. Find something different about yourself and explore that. It,
I love that. My husband actually died on the same year in 2016 too, and I had two kids too. Um, I'm just going to piggyback off you in that.
no
Um,
problem.
I think that, and that was very practical and very helpful, especially for someone who also is not the best cook on the planet. So I might need your book too. So you asked for the steps, Tony, of how what it looked like after my husband died. So um, I think part of what I had to do in the rebuilding was to find hope, and that seems like a really kind of nebulous word that doesn't catch on to anything. But in finding hope that I would feel like myself again, I had to look for my identity. I had to decide about my faith, and I had to rebuild my future. And so the ways that I did that was through a gratitude list. I started to look for things I was grateful for rather than complaining about the things I was grumpy about now that my husband wasn't there to clean the pool, cut the lawn, do all the stuff that he did. And so I did a lot of self-care activities. Like I learned to exercise, I learned to cook healthy meals, but I also did a lot of internal work with the Lord. So my higher power is Jesus. And I had to find my values in what I wanted to do moving forward. So I wanted to find home because I felt like my husband was home when he was in my life. We were together almost 20 years, married 13. And he died when my children were age 4, and my youngest, he died on the 1-year-old's birthday. And so it didn't feel like home anymore because he wasn't there with us. And I felt miserable, honestly. But I found home in writing. I learned to connect with people. And I also learned to fill the spaces where I missed my husband's words of affirmation, his affection, the things that marriage that was amazing provided for me. I learned in my rebuilding of finding a new faith community, building a new identity as a widow and also a woman of God, and taking the steps to, just like you, start a podcast and write a book. And I've been a writer my whole life, but blogging about things that I never would have gone public with prior to this situation. So there's definitely a gift from the grief.
Okay, I'll jump in. As far as my experience after Tom died, he had an 8-month course with this brain tumor. And it didn't really dawn on me until after his memorial service that I had pretty much given up everything that was my part of life. I gave up going to work. I gave up having lunch with friends. I just gave up so many things. I gave up sitting in a chair reading for an hour because of the time it took to take care of him. Tony, to answer your question, what steps did I take? I have to say that probably for the first at least month, but probably closer to 2 months, I can't really remember the steps I took because they were automatic steps. It was making the phone calls to the numerous companies to inform them of Tom's death. It was trying to find out if I was missing anything. And in fact, because Tom wasn't very good about disclosing information, ours was a second marriage for both of us. I actually didn't even know that there was a life insurance policy he had until someone mentioned to me that worked with him at the post office that did I check to see if he had it. Well, in fact, he did, and I wound up getting a check for $15,000 that I clearly would have missed. So much of that first 4 to 8 weeks was automatic. And it was after that that those essential pieces were done that I kind of had the realization that who am I now? I don't have any part of my previous life. I'm completely different. I told my daughter I felt like I had to redefine myself. And clearly that's what I've done. So from that point, the steps I took were intentional steps. And first, it was to get myself out of the house on a regular basis and not just isolate myself. It was go try to do some of the things I used to like to do, like some crafts, some reading, participating in book groups, some writing. I did a lot of journaling. I'm also a writer. But the steps I took were intentional steps toward redefining my life. I didn't really have a goal in mind. I just knew that I had to find things I liked. So, along the same lines that Jay spoke of, or Anna, for me, I don't care if I cook another day in my life. I don't cook anymore unless it's microwavable. I just don't do it. That wasn't one of my choices. But there are many other things that I do. I love to travel, for example. And though it's becoming more of a challenge physically, I'm trying to find different accommodations and adapt different things and everything to go that route. it was later in life for me when Tom died. My children were grown, they were adults, and they're my best friends. So they've been my support. So I would have to sum it up and say the steps I took were intentional steps to redefine myself into a person I wasn't sure what I'd become. But I have to say now, today, I'm probably happier than I've been at any point in my life. I still miss Tom, and I miss the future that we were planning together. I miss the traveling together, but here I am.
I'll jump in here because I guess kind of maybe like to take this a little bit of a different direction, at least for me personally, when I think about it. When Luca died, I was 28, she was 27. We'd been married, like I said, just over 5 years. No kids, 1 dog, 2 cats in the house. So it was 1993. So coming home to basically an empty house as a young man who had just graduated college a couple years before that, was just getting out there. I really didn't know what to do. I mean, there was no Facebook, there was no social media to jump onto. There was nothing. I went to a couple support groups and felt very out of place as a young man, surrounded by people more mature, older. So I basically, one of the unintentional steps I took, well, I actually think it was more intentional, is I stuffed it down. I just figured I can't bring her back. She's not coming back. I can't change it. I can't fix it. I'm angry at God. I was angry at Jesus, and I cried out to them a lot, and they took my anger and absorbed my anger. And then I got up the next morning and just went through my day. I would say one of the intentional steps I took, though, when in thinking about this and listening to you all, was I continued to do some of the things I loved, which was, riding my mountain bike, getting me outside and just getting me away. A lot of tears while I was riding, but it was a way to release a lot of that. But I think the biggest thing I did was shortly after Luca died, one of our cats got hit by a car and died. And then our dog died within a span of a few months after she died. Shortly after the dog died, I went and got another puppy. And that dog, I can honestly say, saved my life, because there were times where I didn't want to be here anymore, but I had that dog to take care of. And I can see a picture of her on the wall in front of me right now, and she's been gone 15 years. But that was an intentional step. I've got to have somebody to take care of, because like a lot of you may or may not have been in the same situation. I took care of Luca. Kathy, you mentioned that. It's like I took care of her in those last 5.5 months of her life as the cancer metastasized and spread, and she got weaker. And so it was something to take care of, because I didn't, like I said, no kids. I needed something to fill my time. And that was one of the intentional things. But also intentionally, and kind of on a negative side, is I pushed everybody away. I pushed everything I felt down. I only cried at night. I only cried in my car by myself. I did have a few close friends who I talked to, but I didn't bring her up. And so then nobody else brought her up, because I just moved. At that point, I moved on. I didn't move forward because I was stuck, but I moved on. So not such a good way to go. And I've learned from that. I have a beautiful wife now who about 8 years ago encouraged me to get into therapy. And that's kind of what led to a lot of my healing and me writing my book and my memoir. And so there is, in my opinion, there is a big difference between moving on and moving forward. Very two distinct things. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Absolutely, Mark. There is a difference between moving on and moving forward.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. And I actually stuffed my emotions and didn't talk to anybody about it.
Yeah.
I did the same thing too. So I get it.
Go ahead, Lakaya.
I lost my husband back in 2014, and just to kind of give you a little backstory on it, my husband was sick. He had high blood pressure, diabetes. He was always in and out the hospital. Kidneys failing. He was on dialysis. I guess it was around March, maybe April, when they found that he had a tumor in his brain, and the tumor busted. He was in the Temple Hospital up there in Philadelphia. And I had to go up there, and he was on life support. And I had to make a decision that I wouldn't wish it on nobody, to have to sit with doctors and decide on whether you're going to keep your husband or your mate on life support or you're going to let him go. I made the decision to let him go, because what life would it be to have him on life support and he's not breathing on his own or nothing else, not moving or nothing. I watched that whole process. But after everything was over, I had to grieve. I would say the first thing to rebuilding is grieving. Allow yourself to grieve as much and as long as you need to. Second thing I did was I kept myself busy. I worked. And I worked the job that he worked. It was an under-table job. So I kept myself busy 7 days a week. Another thing, I had to find myself again. Being married for 10 years and being a wife, you lose yourself in the marriage. And you lose who you are, because you're so used to being, you done took on this persona of being married and being a wife. I had to find out who I was all over again. And I'm not going to say the direction that I took was the best direction, but I took that direction. That direction was going out, and I would go out and party only on the weekends. So much to the point where I remember sitting in a hotel room and I was watching a gospel show, and I just laid down. I just started crying. I just screamed out, "Lord, it's got to be more. It's got to be more. I can't deal with this pain. What else can I do?" And at that point, the healing process began. I went on. I got my own place. I began to accept what I can't change and accepting what I could change. I couldn't change the fact that he was dead and gone, but I can change the fact that I can change how I look at it. I dance more now than I've ever danced, because I did that when he was alive. I write. I'm a blogger. I'm writing a book now, and in that book is about, my book is about my trauma. But in that book, I talked about my husband's death and what I went through during that process.
Can I just say something real quick? Lakia, I understand your situation because I went through it as well. I had to make that decision. And it's interesting. And Anna, you said something that was really interesting too. You had to learn how to be 100% of everything. So when you talked about, you know, you were kind of upset that your husband was going to clean the pool, which meant you either had to do it or you had to outsource it, whatever. And these are the things that when we lose our spouse, like you said, look, you lose yourself in the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And what ends up happening is that it takes some time to figure out who you are. I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting because you think you know who you are, but you've been in this circumstance. I mean, for me, I was married 17 years. I was with my wife 26. I, you know, I had no idea it was the Kim and Jay Lewis show. I thought it was just the Jay Lewis show, but come to find that when that happens, you lose, like I said, you lose some aspect of yourself because it was an identification
Yeah.
that you had for the longest period.
Yeah. Your
Now
identity.
now you have to find, like you said, that part of yourself, something that maybe you can hold on to. I mean, I don't know. I didn't have any steps in my process. It like you said earlier, Kathy, it just happens. You go off a rope in some situations because you realize that if you don't, the circumstance is going to overtake you. So you have to do something. And you might not do the right thing, but you're doing something.
I love that,
And
Jay. I love that. So
you'll
true.
adjust over the course of time.
And I think it's especially difficult too if you have children living at home. There are many things you have to do, whether you feel like it or not, because you have to do it for the children. I was,
Yeah, because they yell under the door, "Mommy,
mommy,
Yep.
mommy, mommy,
Yeah.
mommy."
Even if everything's all right, you can't go
Right?
to the bathroom by yourself. Am I
No.
right?
Ladies,
But in that
Still.
situation, so you wind up stuffing a lot of it, perhaps not intentionally, but for the sake of the children. So
Yes.
that has to
Agreed.
be especially difficult.
and Kathy, you're right about that. I don't know if you ladies have girls, but
I
I
do.
have two daughters.
Yeah.
Too.
Now,
Too. Yeah.
being a single man with daughters, it
Yeah.
was absolutely bananas because I
Right.
am sitting there.
Teenage daughters.
Yeah, I'll never forget when my youngest came in and she was like 14. And she says, I'm like, baby, how was your day? How's everything? And she just breaks down crying.
Well,
And she says, Daddy, my boyfriend cheated on me. Now I'm
oh,
sitting there. I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to kill this guy. But my other side was this is what she would normally have a conversation with her mother about.
right,
Mm.
So
right.
now I have to learn how to look at this. And, you know, I can automatically take the I'm gonna kill this guy approach. But
Yes, that's the dude approach, right?
right, but that's not what she wanted to hear.
No,
Right.
What
Yeah.
she wanted to hear was, Daddy, how, why, you know, and now I had to take my mind out of see was here's the bad part. In the beginning, I kind of understood the 14-year-old dude because I've been a 14-year-old dude, you know,
yeah,
but now I had to understand the mind of a 14-year-old girl.
yeah. What's
Mm.
the matter with me, Daddy? What's the matter with me?
And that was my whole thing. And I had to explain to her that it's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah,
It's unfortunately that guys at that age, we are totally hormone driven. And when a situation presents itself, instead of us using our mind, we're going to go off our hormones,
Mhm.
and that's kind of what that conversation was.
yeah,
But again, all of it is just over time. I had
yeah,
to learn
yeah.
that I need to re-strategize
Hmm.
with so many things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
that's kind of like what Lakaya said too. The focusing, going from focusing on your loss to what can I do now?
yeah,
right.
Where do I go with this? And like Mark too, getting a puppy. I got a hamster and the hamster died too because of the lack of because of the sorry, Mark. I just got some just to redeem myself,
Sorry.
got some guinea pigs and a bunny. So, and they're okay, and the kids are old enough now, and they're taking care of them. So the animals are safe here. Don't call PETA on me.
Yeah.
But I do want to say that the pivoting from, like Kathy's talking about, you go from caregiving, and you're all in
Hmm.
they're sick, and Mark said that too. They're sick, and even Jay and Lakaya, like, yes, they're sick even for a day. it's the same mentality. It's the same mind that you're so focused on them because you don't see the end. And then you go from that to, oh my gosh, on the other side of it, now what do I do? Now who am I? Now where do I go? Now what is my purpose? Now what's my focus? What effort do I put something in? And really it's kind of like throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall, you know? It's like you go to the parties, you do too much work. I did so much writing. I did like 8 hours a day of writing, like when my kids were napping or in bed. It was like I tried to do all this stuff to get it all away so I didn't have to deal with it. But then when it was like, okay, I'm going to reframe. I'm going to do what I can do now. What can I do to feel better and be positive? And Mark mentioned therapy, you know, and prayer and even telling God like, hey, I'm mad, but I'm still going to talk to you. I don't like what's going on, but let's get this worked out so I can stop being stuck and move forward through the grief as opposed to staying stuck in it and just moving through the motions, right?
Yeah. Nikki, how about you? It sounds like your husband's death was sudden, very sudden.
It was very sudden. It was a big shock, and I was in another country. And so that whole process, the immediate process of that, because I was on my own in a space that was completely foreign. So it involved a lot of authorities and things like that. And I found in the beginning, in that immediate beginning, because I had family members when they could came over, and it was just that very much. Part of it was a lot of shock, and there was a lot of things I had to go and do that were like I couldn't imagine ever having to do in my life, like identify a body and things like that, and you know, being in a foreign hospital and seeing all of those moments and moving through that kind of like the judicial process, and that when you're in this, it's just like a big whoa, and it's like you're on autopilot. But I also found it really interesting because there were pockets of telling stories about him with his family that were really funny, and it was just this really like it was this dance between of like I'm laughing about this stuff right now and this feels a bit strange or what I think I have to be doing, as opposed to I really went within and I followed my flow. So when is that my internet or your guys' internet? It just keeps on circling around. I don't know. And then I came back home. Are you guys fritzing out on your internet, or is it just me? Because it's quite windy here today.
I think it's just you.
I'm not sure. Is it?
It's all good. We can hear you. We can hear you.
Hear you. Even when it circles, we can still hear you.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so all of these really little funny, interesting things would happen that I laugh about now. And it was just so him, like even coming back home to New Zealand, and like the whole repatriation process, and the time that it took. And then it was such a long time towards from when it happened to when he was buried. And then there was that, because you're not doing all of that, because organizing a funeral in the first place is just, it's the pits. You're in this space and you're trying to do, and it's this organization. And then it was after then, because we had been together for nearly 10 years. This was my adult life, from 18 into this space, and being widowed at 27. And because you've grown into this beautiful co-creation, this partnership with someone, of the way that you are, everything that you're doing is in commune with. And so the loss that was experienced at the time was it's me now, but everything you plan, and I sat in the grief. For me, it was the best thing I ever did, was to sit and surrender and allow myself the experience of all of these emotions of cocooning in bed, and people were so uncomfortable around me because they couldn't fix me. You can't fix me. And I know now it was other people's discomfort because it's that I need it to fix because I'm feeling uncomfortable. And the weirdest, people say the weirdest stuff when you're in the
So
they
true.
say, oh, you're young, you'll find someone else. And I'm like, and you hang on to the really, like, there's moments of hanging on to, like, why the heck would you say that? And then there's all these bits of more grief. Because of what I went through, and it was on a public scale, the comments, what was really hard was people's opinions of what happened when they weren't even there. And so I lent into the grief, and I allowed myself the experience. And I found myself getting into this, it was a very present process, and it was really, really uncomfortable. But all of a sudden, I found myself, I was at my mum's house and I was watching daytime TV and I was doing jigsaw puzzles. And that was my thing. I was like,
Yeah.
there's one piece at a time. One piece, I can do the
Me
puzzle.
too.
And eventually happened was I was getting really, like, I could feel that I was like really, really in the thick of the depths. And I remember in this space, I was watching something that was similar to like, it was Jeremy Kyle. It was like a daytime talk show, like kind of like Jerry Springer, and they were having these big upsets about who was cheating on who, and I was like, what the heck? Like, this is your problem? And I couldn't get and I was really in the thick of it, and in my heart was saying, if you carry on this path right now, you're gonna want to axe yourself out of here. And old mate who's just left before you, he's gonna be a bit disappointed because it was nearly me gone too. I'm still living because of this experience that I went through, and he protected me. So I decided, am I a runner? No. Did I go for a run? I'm like, okay, I'm going to schedule a time to make a run. And I started doing that every day. And then I moved into my own space at the beach. I had the best tan of my life that year. I started writing. I ended up writing, like creative writing, and winning awards. And like that took me into that process of, at the same time, I'd have moments of where I was doing that big guttural crying down the wall, like water dripping down and just feeling so alone in that space. But because I allowed myself that experience and I took the opportunity. So my thing was, well, I'm still here. And so I would do things like, I'm really uncoordinated in sports, but I started playing social sports to connect with people. I'm like, but then I go out and play, and I was like, okay. Or I knew not to drink while I was in that space because I knew that was going to be really unhealthy for me. But when I went out with friends, I would go out with friends, and because people who knew what I'd been through, and I would be consoling them in a bar at 1 o'clock in the morning. It's like, I'm okay at, like I'm in this okay space. So it has been a huge, like each note in this experience, I've been through the phase of I would talk about a lot. I would talk about a lot about him and like our memories, and that really helped. And yes, that made people uncomfortable around me as well. Specialized in the awkward, but also I found myself. I went through the evolution of. I was wanting to support other people in the space because there were other griefs that came along so soon afterwards with family members that were really gnarly. And I was wanting to share my experience because I was still wanting to heal myself by sharing my experience. And so it was like a projection, and so now I've done this and the psychological to understand. So now that I'm I'm in so much awareness of like I show up in spaces. I wrote the whole experience down. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna, like, I wrote it all down. It's still in a box because now I don't need to. The drive for me to publish that before about everything leading up to the experience isn't there for me anymore because I've moved beyond that. But to get it out on paper was really good, really good for me because it was through the lens of still in the space of feeling lost. But now I'm in the space of I am so appreciative of everything, all of those moving parts that happened. Of now I really listen to my intuition. I can look in the mirror and say I love you to myself. I'm not reliant upon another person for that. And there was those moments that I went through of like, oh, I'm going to travel. Oh, where would he want to go? I'm going to do this for us. And now I'm like, no, this is me. And so there's no missing for me because he's there. He's like, if I just called him in, I could connect with, for me, like just connect with his spirit. But I haven't lost anything. I've gained myself in this experience, and loving and knowing who I am, and the way I see life and death is completely different. And the way I connect with myself and the way that I move through the world is in such a beautiful evolution of itself. And the way I see him, I don't see him as the guy I was married to. I see him in this beautiful energy beyond that. And it's, for me, it was super, for me, the best thing I ever did was surrender to the emotions and allow myself to be in the thick of it. Because it wasn't just the loss at the time of him. It's also the loss of everything else, everything else that compounds in that space.
Yeah.
Nikki, can I jump in and
Yeah.
say one thing? You said something interesting, and I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but people get, like you said, they get uncomfortable when you have conversations. Have you found that the friendships that you had, because they were friendships based off of your relationship, they changed a little bit when you became a singular entity? The people that you used to be able to lean on were available when it was the both of you. But when you became a singular entity, you thought that the friendship was going to stay the same, but it changed a little bit when you started having conversations about the person you with. I mean, when I would talk to some of people that I thought were my friends about my wife, the first thing they say is, I've heard things like, well, why don't you move on? Why don't you go? I'm like, I can't move on. I mean, I've been with this woman 26 years. I can't just, if I was to just up and move on, then I wouldn't, it would seem to me like I just didn't love her. But don't get me wrong, it wasn't like I was trying to wallow in that whole thing. I was just saying, like, hey guys, I want to have a conversation, and I want that conversation to include my wife, which was your friend too. And I want us all to be able to reminisce.
Are you, Jay, are you asking her about, so I had a friend whose husband was also murdered in a very public and social way. And is the discomfort, I mean, there is a discomfort layer with the grief and talking about a death of a sudden illness or sudden situation versus cancer or long-term illness. But there's this other layer I have found in supporting my friend whose husband was murdered. This other layer of discomfort because of the murder, because of the circumstances, how it happened, that makes people have this discomfort that, and not that, oh, he died from cancer at 40, that's okay. It's still awkward. it's still
Right, but
uncomfortable.
it's totally, like
But
you said, totally different. It's
but
totally
with
different.
murder, I feel like it adds a layer to the difficulty of people wanting to identify with you or comfort and not. So is that kind of the
You know
direction?
what? My thing, see, what I was getting to Nikki, what I was asking Nikki about was more about the relationship changing, and it didn't really matter how the circumstance occurred of the death. That wasn't my whole thing. That's why I kind of opened this up to everyone, saying that how was your experience
Mm.
when it came to having to deal with people about the loss? You
If
know,
I
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, well, I didn't mean to cut you off, Jay. I'll jump in when you're done.
No, no, I mean, I want to find out honestly because
Okay.
maybe I was the only one. I don't know.
Well,
You know,
I'm going to speak from an experience. First of all, my heart goes out to every one of you here who's lost a spouse. I cannot personally identify with that, but I can personally identify with catastrophic loss. And I know the loss of a spouse at any age is catastrophic. For me, my most catastrophic loss was the transition of my daughter at the age of 18 over 20 years ago due to cancer. And what I wanted to say is about we talked earlier about the steps. I think one of the things that regardless of the person that we lost or the cause of death, the steps that we take to move through grief are very similar. I think regarding all losses, we try to figure out what kind of a person we're going to be in a world that's now different. What type of world do we want to live in? What are we going to embrace as far as beliefs moving forward? It's about also acknowledging the loss. It's about mourning. It's about finding support. It's about, Kathy, I think, as you mentioned, taking those steps after in terms of calling insurance companies, making proper notifications. All of that are very similar throughout the whole process. There's two things, though. There, I think, and I'm going my friends are different. I lost a few friends. My support group changed very, very, very much because I had changed. I had changed. My priorities had changed, but they also did not know how to relate to me and chose to really just kind of stay away because grief was an uncomfortable topic. And I had to learn to live with that. And I also had to learn to find people who were going to align with me in my new world. One of the things that I think tends to happen when we grieve is we think a lot of people think things are going to remain the same. Well, guess what?
No.
Your spouse died. My daughter died. My it could have been my brother or sister. The world's different.
Yeah.
We are permanently changed. There's no solution to this. There's no fix. Nobody's going to come down from the great beyond and say we're going to give you your life back. It's now this is the life that we got. How are we going to move it? We're moving forward. And I think one of the things you had mentioned, I think Nikki had mentioned about about letting the emotions encompass you, letting them envelop you. I had to wallow through the muck before I could get through it. Wallow through it. I had to wallow in it. I had to wallow in it. I had to let those emotions take hold until I could learn to move through with a new reality. The other thing, and I heard Nikki had mentioned earlier about embracing psychology and spirituality. I was always rational based. Now I've embraced both psychology and spiritual practices. I take a little bit of Buddhism, Native American spirituality, a little bit from scripture. I take a little bit from everything. Um, I have my support group is composed of intuitives, individuals who integrate psychology and spirituality. If you asked me over 20 years ago if that was ever going to happen, I would have said, well, you're doing drugs. Pee in a cup for me, and I'll get you drug tested. It's just like, no, I would have never thought that. But the bottom line is that grief and loss dictates that we embrace new perspectives and that in order to move through it, we almost need to. Because the way we looked at the world before is going to be inevitably different. So I guess I know I may be rambling a little bit, but the steps we took are not different, are the same. But the question I would pose to everybody, for me, is what makes losing a spouse, why does it hurt so much? And also, what makes it different and unique from other losses? What makes it different and unique from child loss? What makes it different and unique from sibling loss?
Can I answer that? Because I actually just wrote an article on my website about that.
Go ahead.
The is the actual loss of a person. It's not different. The difference is you made a connection with someone. It's not like you birthed this person or they birthed you. You literally, you didn't know this person at one time, and you built a relationship over time. And when you built that relationship over time, you became part of a unit that is, again, it's not like a child that you unfortunately raise and they pass, or it's not like a parent or a sibling. It's not that kind of attachment. It's literally someone that you meet and you form a connection with that person over time. And that connection, when it is severed, it becomes interesting because re- remember, no matter how long you've been with that person, you became a unit at a certain time. And because you became a unit, like I'll say it like this: when my wife died, I felt like I lost my right arm. I'm not gonna lie. And it was the hardest thing for me to figure out how to regain that arm. The truth of the matter is, and again, it's not to say that any loss is one loss is more than the other. I am not saying that. What I am saying is it's a totally different. It's almost weird because you've built this relationship, the circumstance with this person, and once you've built that relationship with that person, when, like I said, when it's severed, you have no idea who you are anymore. For a minute, you have to regain who you are.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in. I didn't mean to interrupt, Jay. Are you
No,
done?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
finished. Please go ahead.
I agree completely, Jay, with what you said about this is, you become part of a unit and everything. You expect that you're going to, at some point, leave your parents. You're going to be separated from your parents um, through lifestyle experiences, whether it's marriage or going off to college or whatever. That's expected in life. If you have children, you expect that they're going to grow up, get married, or take jobs somewhere else, and they're going to leave home as well. You expect that. For me, losing a spouse, it's the reality of those words, till death us do part. We don't expect death to really happen. We expect that it's going to be the two, that pair, that couple, that unit together until the end of time, so to speak. But when death interrupts it, it's that reality of the situation, and we're not prepared for it. That's my opinion.
I think that's a beautiful way to explain it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think too that the additional layer of intimacy, I think with other people, we share our physical body, we share our emotion, but with my friends, I don't share certain parts of my body. I keep my bathing suit area to myself, right?
Right.
And with I know I'm being a little tongue in cheek, but if we look at the marriage relationship, that person gets access to the deepest parts of us. And for better or worse, right? That's part of the vows too. For better or worse, they see all of it. And when you are building a relationship with someone who I often describe, we did a lot of marital counseling for couples who are struggling in their marriage. And I often describe marriage as a mirror. So when you have a mirror, you see everything. You see the cilantro in your teeth. You see, bad hair. You see all this stuff that behind closed doors, everybody else on the planet, once you grow up and you're on your own, nobody sees that. accept your person,
And,
and
and
then
I'm
they
not gonna
die.
withdraw. I don't like seriously, and I'm being tongue in cheek too. But I remember the first time my wife farted, and I was just like, I was like, "Do you do that really?" You know, and stuff like that. You
Mhm.
know, so I absolutely understand what you're saying. You talked about cilantro, and and then you have to actually accept that. You know what I'm saying? You have to
Yeah,
accept that this person is actually a person.
yeah.
You know, they have functions just like you do. You know, I'm sorry, I kind of got a little over, but it was funny how you said that with the cilantro and the teeth thing because that immediately came to my mind. I was like, I never forget the first time that happened, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, first off, I'm like, it's not like you're not human, but the second thing is, I'm like, you actually do that, and
Keeping
it's
it real, Jay. Keeping it
yeah.
real.
I mean, it is what it is in that
It's true.
respect.
It's true.
But
When we're intimate with that person, it brings it to a totally different level. Not better or worse. Not we're not. There's no grading. Number one, this is the worst loss. 2, 3, 4. It's not like that, but it's just a different connection with your heart and your body and your soul than other relationships.
Okay. I saw you trying to chime in.
Um, Everybody has a valid point, but when I really look at my situation with my husband, one of the things I had to understand is he was dead and he was gone, and I think that's one thing a lot of people are afraid of is death. And I think that was one of my things, one of my biggest fears is once he dies, now I'm alone. At one point, I told him, I said, while he was alive, I said, you die, I'm dying with you. It said death do us part. That means you die, I dies with you. But as time went on and going through it, I come to understand that although he's gone and he's no longer here, I still have to live on. I have to live on. The only thing I can do is remember him for who he was when he was alive. Remember the good times, the bad times. Remember what he stood for. And if we, in dealing with spouse loss, if we can understand that we have to, it's about memories. No, they're no longer here. They're no longer with us. We had a routine when they was alive. There was a routine going on, but there's no longer a routine. We have to remember the memories that we shared with our mates, with our spouse, the whole time that it was alive. And that's what has, I think that's really what has kept me going and what has allowed me get through the healing process as far as my husband's loss and the other losses that I've had is the memories I have of them. And every now and then I'll laugh to myself.
Yeah, the one thing that Lakaya talked about. Am I pronouncing your name right? Like, is it Lakaya? Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yeah,
Perfect.
yes.
That's good. I'll quit while I'm ahead then. I probably won't say anything else, but seriously, you talked about keeping your husband's memory alive. I think that's important for any kind of loss. Is we learn to transform the relationship with our loved one by keeping their memory alive. It could be through a specific object that elicits stories. It could be integrating the best parts of our loved ones into who we are and moving forward with our grief with them as opposed to leaving them behind. Um, I remember a woman who facilitated a bereavement support group at hospice. They used to have an activity where they would have individuals bring in an object that elicited a memory of their loved one or a photo. And this one woman whose husband had transitioned, she brought a pasta machine. And so the pasta machine, my friend asked her, what's the significance of the pasta machine? But every night they would discuss finances, they would discuss problems with the kids, joys with the kids, challenges in their marriages, everything, over making pasta every night. So when the object to bring in came to mind, it was it was that pasta machine that elicited the most memories. And you could tell, and my friend told me that, you could tell that her husband was coming alive through that pasta machine. And it was like you were experiencing those memories in real time. And I think regardless of the person you've lost, regardless of the cause of death, regardless of any other layers, I think as Anna so eloquently put that, transforming the relationship through connecting to memory and moving forward with those memories are going to help us adjust to a different world. And that's all I got for now.
Absolutely. I wanted to just say one thing earlier. Kathy, you had mentioned you were like, I'm done with cooking. And you know what? I feel you, because let me explain something. You are like a crafty veteran in this cooking thing, and I'm, like I said, I only picked it up because it was either that or waste a gang of money eating at McDonald's and places like that. So that's why I did that. Plus, let me explain something. I was a microwave king during that time. So I don't like microwave food anymore. You know what I'm saying? That's my thing. But no, it just being funny. I understand exactly what you were saying. Like, you've done that all of your life. Raising children, taking care of your husband, all those things. But I think someone said this earlier. Finding something new about yourself. That's really where the cooking thing came from me. It was just an opportunity to find something new.
Oh,
I had
understand.
no idea
Yeah.
that I could even do this. And then it got to a point where I had no idea I actually liked it. That was the other part. Because I would sit there. It got to a point where I'm watching freaking cooking shows and stuff like that. As far as I was concerned, I was like, there's no action in this cooking show. But all of a sudden, you're attracted to these things. I had one of my clients who got into full contact MMA fighting, and she had been mugged. And it was just like, she had no idea that getting her power back came with learning how to MMA fight. And she learned how to MMA fight. Now she's on Fight Card. Mind you, she was mugged and afraid to actually leave her house. So she went from one transition, or she went from one extreme to the other. Finding herself.
Right.
And unfortunately, sometimes I think we have to go through some very challenging situations.
So are we going to do a global grief network cooking show? Is that what I'm hearing? And we're going to do pasta makers for we're going our raffle for global.
I'll be a judge.
And Kathy's going to taste the food. And Jay's going to come up with the recipe. He's going to be Jay and Tony and Dave, right? And Lakaya is going to be up there too. And then it's going to be Mark against Nikki and me. And I'm not going to win.
I make a mean pasta. I went to Italy.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
I'm going to be the loser. I'll be the one everyone laughs at when they're making pasta.
You guys want to know how funny that was? Lakaya and I was actually talking about during the cooking. I was telling her about Jay, and here you are mentioning it and everything. So I watched Lakaya. She's just over there just dying laughing.
I think it should be a competition, though.
Oh my God! You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's
Hell,
hilarious.
like,
We need to
hell,
make it Gordon Ramsay style.
There
hell,
you go.
like,
Kathy,
Hey.
you and I could be. How about we eat the food? And
That,
then
well, I said I'll be a judge.
I'm
no
not,
problem.
Yeah, I'm not.
I'm
not,
happy
No.
to be a
I'm not
judge.
a chef.
I ain't
if
messing
you,
with y'all no more.
hey,
That's awesome.
We could make it a
if you-
fundraiser, Tony. It could be a fundraiser.
Right?
Hey, I'm thinking it'd be
Oh.
fun.
And we
really
will
think it
raffle.
would be a lot
We
of
will
fun.
raffle that pasta maker off.
Oh,
Right?
There you
all
go.
I'm going to say
Micaiah
is
and I
that
was, we came up with a name. Cooking for what was it? Cooking for soul food for the lost.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what we was talking about. I told her, I said, this is your thing, you know what I'm saying? So whatever you
Okay.
decide that you want to do with
I
it,
like you
know,
can
but
put
soul food for the
merch.
lost, because
I see the
Make it
merch.
happen.
right,
I
well,
see the
she's from the
merch.
South
Yep.
too. And so she was talking about all these, man, she over here was talking and she had my mouth watering. She was talking about making what was it? Homemade macaroni and cheese and throwing bacon in there. And my mouth started watering. I was like, look, I can't talk to you no more.
I'm glad my kids can't hear. They would
Right?
be all
Hey.
over that.
if I could say something, if you're going to eat my food, you're going to sign a disclaimer notice. I'm not going to be freaking responsible. I'm not going to be responsible for anything that happens to you, physically health wise or mental health wise, if you eat one of my microwave smart choice meals.
I saw Mark was trying to tune in. Mark, come on, jump in and would you add in if you want.
Well,
Yeah.
I would just say I totally agree with 99% of what's been said about the loss of a spouse. Even though my loss was, like I said, 30 years ago, it's easy to go back to that point in time, if you will, in a lot of ways. The intimacy, the physical intimacy, the emotional intimacy, all of that is so layered on it. And I can't speak to the loss of a child or anything like that. But the question I had, that as I listen to this, because the marriage vows, till death do us part, I take those very, very seriously. And that's why I stood by her bedside as she died. That's why I went to the chemo treatments. I went to, all of that. But my question is, because one of my favorite quotes by Stephen Jenkinson in his book Die Wise is, loving someone is not inevitable. Loving someone who will die is.
Yes.
Whether it's a spouse or somebody. If you're going to love somebody, you run the risk of them dying. So we know that on one level, and we do these vows, these marriage vows that till death do us part, but we kind of gloss over it,
Exactly.
and then kind of, when we don't, and why is that as human beings? I mean, I know the comment was made about not being afraid of death. I agree with that. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of dying a painful death, but I'm not afraid of death, if you will. But we still gloss over that, well, we're not going to die, or they're not going to die, or nothing's going to happen. It's like, is it the reality too much to face? And this is something I've struggled with myself over the years. I have, an 18-year-old daughter now, and, a wife, and someday one of us is going to die. It's like, but you don't think about that. You try not to focus on that. Is that just a human reaction? Whoops. As we get into this, I hope Jay's okay.
You okay, Jay?
Jay?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
My computer's about to die.
I mean,
so I had to go find something.
Okay. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. It's just an interesting question for me that I've wrestled with.
Yeah, I understand that, Mark. I think a lot of it, we gloss over it because our mind certainly is not on death on the day we're reciting those vows.
Exactly.
We're so excited about that moment, that milestone in our lives, and we're looking forward to our future, and that's what we're focused on. It's just not focus. That's not our focus at that point. I think unless you've had a lot of losses just prior to that, then it might be a little more. I know for Tom and I, this was our second marriage. It was later in life. And it was 17 years ago when Tom and I married. But even at that stage in our life, that phrase wasn't one that I focused on, because my mind was just on the fact that we had our future ahead of us.
First off, I'm back and I'm okay. Thank you. But Mark, it's very interesting because we don't focus on the death do you part until it comes up. Like for me, I remember I was sitting in my wife's bedside. At this point, she was in a full coma. Had a brain cap on. Things were things were not good.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to her, and all of us. First off, all of a sudden, craziest thing happened was all of a sudden she actually turned her head, and she shouldn't have been able to. And she said twice, she said, "I'm sorry.
Mm.
I had no idea what that was." I think she was saying, "I'm sorry, like, I'm sorry I'm leaving you. I'm sorry I'm leaving you with the girls," all that. I had no idea. Unfortunately, the next day she did pass away. But I actually read into the fact that sometimes people that know that they're passing will use their last little bit of energy
Mhm.
Mhm.
to let you know that they
Right.
they are sorry that they're leaving you behind.
Mhm.
They're and it's weird because again it goes back to that, Dave. You asked earlier, this connection that was made. I mean, uh, it scared me when this woman who was absolutely catatonic, who was on Demerol and fentanyl, plus she was in a coma,
Wow.
had a brain cap on because she lost brain function, had 4 heart attacks. There's no way she should have been able to talk to me.
Mhm.
But the fact that she did,
Hmm.
that superseded, you know, a lot of things. And it lets you know that the connection,
Mm.
whatever the love was, the circumstance, the connection was there. And it's somewhat different. Like I
Mm.
said, it's not on a level different. It's just a different experience. That's all. You know,
That's beautiful.
that's my whole thing. And then, like you said before, Mark, I mean, we literally don't we gloss over the death do you part thing. The only time we broach it is when it actually is about to happen.
Yeah. And I'm not saying we shouldn't. We should focus on it, but at the same time, why are we so surprised when somebody dies? Oh, I can't believe they died.
Yeah,
We're all going to die. I hate to say that, but it's the truth.
No,
We are
it's
all
true.
going
It
to
is the
die.
truth.
You know?
And Mark, before I got to jump in, John, this is for you. For that beautiful unceremonious dive that you just took, you got a you got
Yeah.
a 10.0 from the upstate New York
Good
coach.
looking.
So
Good looking.
just so you know that you got a
Hey,
10.0
thank,
from the upstate New York coach.
thanks. At least
Global
somebody was
Grief
judging
Network
my fault.
judge.
Tony.
Yep,
Global
you know,
Grief
Dave,
Network judging. Right,
And
right there.
yeah,
I didn't.
but Tony, we got to do Global Grief Network gymnastics for
Nah,
Vegas.
man,
Make
trust
sure
me.
you got the
I'm,
liability insurance.
So-
Dave,
I'm
let
telling
me
you right
tell
now,
you, I was slipping
I
all
am
over the
not going
place
to
and
be
falling.
responsible for that one.
I mean, I'm trying to catch lights as they were falling,
Right.
and then at the same
I
time
am not
plug
going to be
in a computer
responsible
that's
for that
about to
one.
die.
But you got a
Y'all start
10.0.
flipping and everything. I'm gonna walk away. I'm just gonna walk outside the building. I'm gonna go. Whatever happens in there, I am not involved.
Yeah, anyway,
I'm totally walking away.
Don't worry, I signed the release. It's all good, Tony. You know what I'm saying?
So I wanted to jump in really quick. The first 6 months my husband had chemo with his cancer, he didn't change. His work schedule was adjusted because obviously he had cancer and chemo. But for the first 6 months, the tumor stayed stable, and so I kept asking him, like, why are you just acting like, why is it normal, right? Why does it just keep, why is it staying steady? And he was like, not really thinking about his mortality and not talking about that part of it. He's like, you know what, we're going to stay the course, we're going to fight this as long as we can. And so that kept it to be, the conversation stayed away from death that way, right?
Yep.
But then as it got closer and closer to him actually dying, especially the year prior, then we started talking about it more, and um, we would talk to other people about it, which speaks to Nikki's point about people being totally uncomfortable.
Mhm.
It's like, you want to talk about it, you want to talk about the emotion, you want to have people there with you to support you in that and talk about the hard stuff, Mark, right? And Jay, like about death, right? And I mean, Kathy talked about, her husband and just dropping everything and just focusing on the caregiving. It's like that adds a layer, right? And I'm sure you have that too, Dave, with your daughter passing, and Lakaya, like having your husband go in and out of the hospital, and you too, Mark, right?
Mhm.
With all the treatments and all the different things that are happening medically, there's a part of us, I believe, that we want to deny death, right? There's a lot of books talking about the denial of death. And there's also this other beautiful part, like Nikki brought up, like marrying the psychology with spirituality, which sometimes does happen after an event like this, where we can talk about it. And then we come to a place like Global Grief Network, and we create cooking classes for the grievers, and we eat together, and everything feels,
Yay.
it's hard, but it's good and tasty, right?
And you know what?
Amen.
What
I think
what I wanted to say was, it's interesting because
I'll be right back.
We're all in a group where we just simply understand
Mhm.
each other's loss. And again, whether it's a spouse or a child or a sibling or a parent, it's loss.
Mhm.
And talking, we can't, it's difficult to talk to outside sources who have not had the experience in some way, shape, or form. So it does seem, I think, Nikki, to your point earlier, it just, it seems like you've made an uncomfortable conversation with them, when in reality it's not uncomfortable at all. It just is the fact that this is your reality, and because it's your reality, you want to share your reality with people you think would understand. What I had to learn was that I had to not be upset at people.
Mm.
I had to not be mad
Mm.
because they don't understand what I'm going through. And the natural reaction with people is, if they don't understand, their whole thing is, well, sometimes people can be a little crass. And, and again,
Right.
it's in their nature, only because they don't they don't they don't know how to react properly to it.
Mm.
So instead, I think, Nikki, you said something like, you're young, somebody will say something stupid and cruel. I mean, you know how many times people would come to me and be like, they say something like, how come you're not dating yet? Yo, first off, it took a minute to figure out what was, I mean, this was a woman that was okay with seeing all my flaws. You know what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
now I have to start this thing over. And again, that's not to say it's not it's not to happen. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, like, when you haven't had time to properly mourn over your loss, to just say like something as cruel as that, it almost indicates that you never really loved the person that you were with. And people don't understand that. They just don't understand it. So like I said, I just had to not be upset at the way people do or say things.
So when the people were trying to tell me, hey, we're pooling money, we're gonna ship, my husband's name was Ryan, we're gonna ship him off to Spain, and he's gonna get shark cartilage infusions with coffee enemas. So I had to be supportive with his business associates who suggested those things to me and say, I don't think that's going to work for us.
Right.
We get that there are alternate choices, but they would tell us, oh, you got to juice, you got to do this, you got to avoid sugar. It's my problems in my life causing my husband's cancer. They said all kinds of stuff for 5 years. I heard a lot of it, and I was like,
You know
All right.
what, Anna? Unfortunately, everybody wants to point when something does happen.
they do.
Listen, when my wife died, I never realized the claws came out of so many people
Mm,
because everybody they want to answer
mm,
to the unanswerable.
mhm,
And obviously, I was that point. Like, I mean, it took a long time for me and my mother in law to actually have some type of relationship.
mm,
Because, I mean, whenever she saw me,
mhm.
I was a reminder of her daughter.
Yeah,
I had been with her so long.
yeah,
And I couldn't understand that. Because I'm like, I, dude, I have kids. These are your
yeah,
grandkids.
yeah.
But what it took me time to understand, like having the like what Dave was saying. Look, I'm upset that I lost my wife, but what I didn't understand was that my mother-in-law lost her daughter,
Mm,
and it took a long time for me to understand her pain,
mm,
just like it took her a long time to understand mine.
mm.
You know, and we're still not the best of friends, but we have a much better understanding
Mm.
of our
I,
relationship
and I think the key
based
thing
on
is just having a conversation about where we're all at with our grief and the unique challenges that we've had for each loss, and just be willing to witness it. Too many
Right.
times we judge another person's path as, well, my grief is worse than your grief. No, I mean,
Mm,
pain's
mhm,
relative. I mean, the
mhm,
pain that changes everything. And
mhm.
just to quickly answer Mark's question before I forget, um, I can sum up our reluctance to talk about death when I heard this term. If something happens to me, I want you to do this. Well, take the if out of it because we're all going to die someday.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
and that I don't say if anymore. I just say when something
When?
happens.
Yeah.
When
It's
it happens.
inevitable. No,
Right.
we die. It's inevitable. And
Yeah.
but that reflects many in society's fear of talking about death. Well,
Right.
talking about death isn't gonna cause you to die.
No.
It's something that
Mm,
we need to have an honest conversation about. Because
mhm,
as Maury Schwartz once said in
mm.
Tuesdays with Maury, once you learn how to die, you learn how to live.
Yeah.
And we can't learn how to die unless we talk about it. Because
Mhm,
then we can learn how to live.
you know
mhm.
what, Dave?
Amen.
You just summed it up right. I mean, the bottom line is you'll never know how to live if you don't understand that there is, at some point, it ends.
Yeah.
We only get one life. So
Mhm.
the truth is, use it to be the best version of us that we possibly can.
Hmm.
Right.
You know, that maybe that means getting out of your comfort zone. Maybe that means, exploring something new. I mean, for the longest time, I could not stand eggs. I I I convinced myself I was allergic to them. But when my wife died, and one day my daughters love eggs, so I would
Mm.
always make them something. I tried it. I was like, this not so bad. Let me explain something. I got to the point I eat eggs every day now. You know, and I mean just silly things like that, where we learning to be a different version of us, not a different version. I'm sorry, a 2.0 version of us.
Hmm.
You know,
Mhm.
I mean, it's elevating ourselves somehow, some way to see that, you know, again, we only get one life. So for us to deny ourselves these opportunities just doesn't make sense. You know,
I like, oh, I'm sorry. Were you,
no, no,
I don't
please go
want to interrupt.
ahead. Because
Thank you.
I talk too much. So
Oh,
please go ahead.
no, I have, nope. I appreciate that. So my mother-in-law actually didn't come to the funeral for my husband. And my mom had passed away already. And so I felt really bummed about that. And she came to me very recently and said to me, um, you know what, I'm really sorry that I wasn't able to support you, but if I could redo it, I would do it exactly the same because I did the best I could at the time with what I knew. And it took me it took me a little while to forgive and work through it, but I had done that years ago. So then when we had the conversation about it, it was like, amends for what? Like, this is water under the bridge. And so now, you know, you're talking about like the repair and trying to work through. We have a different relationship because, you know, in your case, your wife died, and in my case, my husband passed. So her son is who she's missing, and your daughter in that sense. But it's the same it's the same issue that it's like we have to also, in addition to kind of reinventing ourselves and rebuilding our lives, we have to also reinvent what role these people who they used to play. I mean, she's always going to be his mom, and she's always going to be my mother-in-law, but that middle person who is connecting us is gone now. And so that connection is different, and renegotiating that, I guess. I don't know the right word. Maybe Kathy can come up with something better.
No, I can't really come up with anything, but it's appropriate that you mentioned that. You know, Tom had, because ours was a second marriage, Tom had children, so there were steps involved. Um, and he was somewhat estranged from his children. We worked hard to repair that, and we did. His kids still call me, and they'll say, "Is anything? Do you need help with anything? You know, if you ever need to move anything or whatever, just let us know. We'll help." And I'm very happy about that. But it is a different relationship, even though that's kind of reverse of the mother-in-law. But it's still a different relationship because Tom, as that connection, isn't there anymore. So it still feels a little awkward when we're together.
Oh man, I think I would love to keep going. But unfortunately, it's that time. It's 6:30, and you know, so I know I had so many. I had another question I
Already?
wanted to do and everything like that. And you know, thank you, Dave, for Dave's been your co-host today and everything. Thank you
Part
guys
two.
for being on the
Yeah.
panel today. And I want
Thanks,
to take
Dave.
some time and let you
You're
guys
welcome.
Thank you.
let people know how to find you. And so we'll start off. Where can people find you, Dave?
Well, people can find me on Facebook. They can go to my website, bootsyandangel.com. They can find me on LinkedIn. They can also go to my author page, which is psychology professor and minister .com. I co-authored a book in 2021 with Reverend Patty Farino called When the Psychology Professor Met the Minister. Um, it is on Amazon. It is in part about the spiritually transformative experience she guided that helped me find peace with my daughter Janine's transition 7 years, in 2010, 7 years after she transitioned. Um, and I also have my own podcast as well, too, the Teaching Journeys podcast. You can find that on Apple and Spotify, um, and other podcast platforms. And that's it. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's your close.
My close.
Again, my name's Kathy Gleason. You can find me in the Global Grief Network, actually. You can also find me at www asiliveandgrieve.com. That's the website for my podcast. Either place. You could message me on Facebook. You can connect through LinkedIn. I'm around. I'm not that hard to find. So I would love to connect with a bunch of you and perhaps have you as guests on my podcast. I know a few have already been guests on my podcast, but I've enjoyed thoroughly meeting the people I didn't know before tonight's panel and getting to know you better. And I look forward to our paths crossing again. If I could say one thing as, oh, call it advice, suggestion, whatever happened and worked for me after Tom died was at some point when I started to think about my intention and my path and where I needed to go. I think the thing that helped me the most was working hard on having an open mind and being open for signs that presented themselves along the way. And it's because of that open mind and those signs and the decisions I made that have brought me to where I am today. And again, I'm probably happier today than I have been at any other point in my life. So thank you and
Agreed.
nice to meet everyone.
Agreed. First off, I'm gonna ask because Kathy, you kind of stole my thunder, but honestly, I want all of you guys on my podcast because
Okay.
my podcast, first off, is called "Give Grief the Finger." I'm sorry, it is what it is, but the truth of the matter is, you can find me on my website jl3motivation.com. You can reach me there. Also, I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook community called The Gift of Grief. So you can touch base with me there as well. And again, you can find me on LinkedIn, anything like that. But my whole thing is I just want to say seriously, thank you all. Because it was an incredible opportunity to have community with people who have had different aspects of loss, who have gone through different things. So thank you all. And again, I'll get your information from Tony because I'm pretty sure he's got it. We'll go from there.
Nikki.
Hi, I show up for people in my work now, incorporating a holistic approach. I'm trying to talk right now. It's funny. I've lost my train of thought. All right. So my space that I work online with people showing up in their shadows at the heart of where their trauma is, the stuck energy is, and talk them through in those spaces so that they can awaken to the freedom of their sacred selves. And so that they're guided by their intuitive wisdom. And so I do a lot of my work is I have my website, nikkijean.com. I have, at the moment, I have my Facebook group called Intuitive Coaching and Spiritual Guidance. And I also have an Instagram account. It's at galactic.oracle. So I incorporate a lot of different modalities and I show up authentically as me. And I know that all the elements of my grieving are part of my journey and part of the fabric of what I bring to the table, but it isn't me. It's not who I am. It's an experience that I have that I can sit and hold space with other people as well without going off on a story to lead you home back to your beautiful truth and your authenticity and your heart guidance for who you are and why you're here. So, I really show up in that space and I love what I do to support people. It makes all of these crazy stories of experiences so worth it to be able to support people deeply in this capacity. So, thank you.
Anna.
Thank you. I am very appreciative, Tony and Dave, for co-hosting and the Global Grief Network. Such a fun bunch. I've only been a part of it a short time, but I'm like a bad penny. I'm just going to keep showing up. So you can find me and my message. So my message combines grief with faith, and it also combines a growth mindset. So that's my little spin on it, looking at the effort, focus, belief, and skill set to get through grief. That's kind of my shtick. That's what I teach. And so you can find me at whenlovestays.com. I'm going to be teaching online courses that I'm launching this fall. My book, When Love Stays, will be also launching. I am doing a podcast called the Sunshine Waters Podcast, and it'll be on Spotify and all the fun podcasting platforms. I'm really excited about launching that. Have a bunch of people. I would love to have all of you on mine too, so that you can come have even more fun conversations or teach me how to cook. Convert me over to the side of light, because I'm on the dark side right now of DoorDash and eating out. So there's that. And you can find me on Facebook at whenlovestays.com, or it's at When Love Stays, Facebook, and then Instagram, When Love Stays. And then I'm also on LinkedIn as Anna Waters. So such a pleasure. It was so fun to be here today. I really enjoyed myself. I'm so glad you all invited me. I feel a sense of belonging in this community, and I look forward to connecting with everyone out there very soon.
Mark.
So, hey, I want to reiterate, thank you, Tony. Thank you, Dave. Thank you to the Global Grief Network. It's been, and each one of you on the panel, it's been great. Best way, I guess, to find me, my website, markshutter.com. I'm on all the socials, either under Mark Shutter, Mark Wayne, because I do a lot of my writings under my middle name, kind of my pen name. I have written a book that came out a couple years ago, Cowboys Are Not Supposed to Cry, story of my loss, my healing in grief, and my life after, and talk a lot about the societal expectations of men, especially young men who are grieving, and expectations we place on ourselves. I recently founded the Job 213 project, which I'm just in the process of building, and that's based on the Bible verse in Job 213, where after Job has lost everything, his three friends come to comfort him, and I'm paraphrasing here, and they see him, and they come and they sit down on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights with no one speaking a word, because they see that his pain is very great. That's where I land in helping people and supporting people through their loss and through their grief. Is I'll come alongside you, because I'll support you in your life after, because there is a life after grief, and we have to make some intentional choices. And I spent a lot of years not making those intentional choices, just thinking this was as good as it can get. And I realize now that, hey, it can be a lot better. So I want to help other people get there too. So thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Micaiah.
You can find Facebook, Lakaya Milborn, or Kai on Facebook. You can also find me on Instagram, Lakaya Milborn, or all things Lakaya Walker, all things Lakaya Milborn, or all Kai, and that's on Instagram. It's been nice meeting y'all. Nice talking to y'all. I enjoyed the conversation. And as far as that food, the soul food for the lost, like I said, give me till November, and I got you on that. I just got to map it out, plan it out, and I'll let you know what's going on with that.
Lakaya, I'm in. You know, all you gotta do is just let me know. I got it.
Yes.
Oh, and real
I'll bring
quick,
the appetite.
Nikki, I just wanted to say, yeah, you are absolutely awesome because of the cat. See, my cat is so wild that I had to get her out of the room. You know what I'm saying? Yours is calm, would just kind of walk past. It was all cool. You know, mine, she wouldn't do that. She would just sit there, look at me and look at y'all and be like, there's something wrong here. You know, so.
That's a different panel, Jay.
Okay, my bad.
I'm glad you like me for my cat, my calm cat. Thanks.
Oh my God. You guys were so amazing. Thank you for being on the panel. And yes, we will be doing a part two. I mean,
Awesome.
so much to unpack. So many great things being said here. For those who are tuning in or who have tuned in today, you guys know what to do. If you guys are watching it through YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified each and every time that we drop a new episode. Also, if you're a grief worker, mental health practitioner, or a trauma recovery coach, come check out the Global Grief Network. As you guys see, we are friends who have became family, and this is what we do. We have fun. If you like to talk the language of grief, this is the place for you. They're here. It's not an awkward feeling. I am Tony Lynch. I am your host, and I'm also the founder of the Global Grief Network, and also the founder of Memories of West, where I offer grief support for men. So if you're a man out there searching for support, come connect with me. And come into the space and let's start the healing process. And if that's not a good fit for you, we also have other resources for you as well. There's no shame in saying, hey, this does not work for me. We have something for everyone. And with that being said, you guys, thank you for tuning in. Panel, thank you for being here today. We had a blast. And until next time, you guys keep your head up in peace.
Bye, everybody. Stay well.
Bye. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
God bless you guys.